It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Rachel Payne. I am a managing director and head of innovation and technology for FullCycle Fund. FullCycle is a private equity fund that invests in companies and their associated technologies to maximize carbon reduction. We are focused on climate critical infrastructure. Nice to meet you.
Can you hear
Hello?
me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Guenther Dobrauz. I'm a partner with PwC in Zurich in Switzerland, where I'm leading the legal part of it all, and I'm also functioning as a member of the global legal leadership team. Historically, I was a venture capitalist and ran a venture fund in Switzerland for more than 10 years. And currently, I'm thinking about putting together a new one with particular focus on sustainability.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cristina Ventura, founder of VenturaXVentures. I've been 20 years working in luxury in companies like LVMH, Gucci, Prada, then Apple, and lately Crawford Joss Group. And I'm one of the early investors of Lablaco, very proud investor of Lorenz and Yoon, and very passionate about sustainability and anything that truly can make an impact, from circular economy to anything as well related to make the world a better place. So very honored to be here with all of you guys.
So right now is a really exciting time for innovation in the circular economy. And we've been seeing so many exciting startups that are launching technologies that have a meaningful reduction in carbon and other environmental harm. We've been very focused on circular economy investments. We started with waste, and we're also looking at ways in which we can integrate natural solutions. I came from a career in technology and recently was also an entrepreneur at residence at Nike, focusing on consumer models around circularity. But as an investor now, I'm really focused on the infrastructure that can enable a circular economy. And in fashion, we've been mapping the entire value chain, and there's been great research that's been done in the industry around that, and where so many of the emissions are concentrated in that process. What have you observed, Guenther?
It's kind of the same. Obviously, to be honest, with all the great opportunities that are going on right now, obviously the current COVID crisis hasn't really helped. So there's a delay of probably half a year or so going on. Obviously, we don't know where this is going, but this has not really helped the industry. But I think everybody's focusing on doing exactly what you were saying. And also, we've been advising a lot of our clients in that space, especially companies in the US and in Europe, kind of trying to bring that circle to a full close.
And Christina, you must have seen a lot over the course of your career. What do you see now in terms of innovations?
So I agree with you. There's so much going on, and I believe as well on the positive outcome that we can take out of this situation at the moment. So, for example, conference like today would have never been possible probably 3 years ago because would have met instead. So this situation is forcing us to think outside of the box and to be extremely creative. I mean, I'm very impressed of what we are seeing today, and imagine to have this with in the future with fashion shows, with people meeting around the world. This will be so impactful in terms of sustainability, because that means save a lot of cost. That means as well create new business models, new businesses, new ways of investing, new ways of partnering, new ways of creating platforms that can enhance the customer experience. So I see the positive outcome of all this moment. And as well, I love the area, for example, of blockchain. I'm very passionate about this one because it can truly make a difference in terms of traceability, in terms of um, transparency, in terms of really seeing what's going on in terms of the production, and therefore we could predict what can be made. We can make as well economies of scale much faster and reachable to everyone, and therefore calculate what can be at the right time and the right for the right customer and the right place. Therefore, reduce the number of garments or products that are being made, and therefore maximize, the outcome on in terms of applying to customer experience. So I see that there's a completely unprecedented timing. We've never seen so much production, and that totally has to change. There was just very interesting report on McKinsey. I'm happy to share offline, guys, that it shows that unless we change, this industry is really in deep trouble because it's impacting, of course, the world. So how can we, from this conference, from today onwards, take action all together through this type of events, through this type of actions and supports LabLaco and any other initiatives as this one to make truly an impact. So I see totally an opportunity, positive outcome, and game changing in the industry after COVID. So it's good times ahead.
When we think about our portfolio, one of our challenges has been to compare different opportunities on an apples to apples basis. So, really being consistent in how we measure the impact that we're seeking. And because our fund is solely focused on those technologies that can really help us abate or draw down carbon, we developed a tool called the Carbon Return on Investment 20, which really measures over the GWP, the global warming potential of 20 years. This is because action is so needed right now. It's really about accelerating action. What are you seeing out there in terms of ways to measure and also opportunities to accelerate action?
So nice, Guenther. I love that you get to speak. So maybe just share with you, in fact, I'm really deeply interested about that. So please, Rachel, share these initiatives, and anybody in the audience that has any measurements in terms of KPIs or OKRs on this, I would be really grateful because we are working on a couple of things. One, it's with MIT Lab. So the Media Lab, it's having this group of people just focusing on the ESG performance. So more and more private equity is looking into that, which is great news. As you know, BlackRock or KKR or JP Morgan as a bank, they are really focusing on ESGs. Therefore, that means that it will go back to then venture capital, angel investment, and of course then into the startups. So one of the key metrics, I believe, is the ESG performance on the PRI, the Principles of Responsible Investment from the UN. So that's something we are looking. So one is MIT Lab, the other one is a PRI with the UN, and any other metric that could be as well impactful. For example, Imagine One is a company that is only focusing on that. In Asia, it's quite new, to be honest. All this area is absolutely new, and I'm really studying and analyzing how can we bring this in a platform that could be applicable to everyone. Another great tool, for example, is Positive Luxury, is a company that measures the impact on luxury companies into the environment and to long-term sustainability. So anything that could be out there, please share, Rachel or Guenther, because I'm very interested, and of course in the audience. But these are the key areas. And you? Guenther?
Well, maybe I think from what you just said, it's already apparent that there's a lot of people out there trying to put together metrics. I think right now we don't have like the one or the two or the three binding that it's access that the people do apply. We're also working with a number of players, in particular in Switzerland, but also beyond, in particular also linked to the organizations in Geneva. And so forth. And it looks like some of the stuff that they're working on is quite promising. Interestingly, they have a bit of a political angle by, if you think about circular economy, where people are really trying to be fully circular, others they're just trying to, reduce the one or the other. So again, I think there's no news out, but we'll be publishing a white paper in the next 2-3 weeks or 4 at the latest, and there are some new ideas in there as well. Ultimately, it's probably going to be another year or two until we have like really solid kind of understandings, but it's all promising, has been said.
Mm-hmm. There has been so much progress on the impact measurement side. We as FullCycle are a signatory to the IFC-led operating principles for impact management, and we just provided our disclosure statements around how we're managing impact throughout our entire process, screening startups, to due diligence, to the KPIs for reporting. And it's a really helpful process for making sure that you're being consistent. And I do agree with you. There's so much advancement being made, Cristina, with some of the private equity funds and others that are out there around ESG metrics. For us, we really want to make sure that we're holding the financial return and the carbon return on investment on equal footing. And so the way that we calculate the carbon return on investment is we look at, what's the baseline in the industry, what are some of the benchmarks around best practices, and then with every opportunity, we evaluate what is the total amount of carbon that's abated for every dollar invested. And that gives us a way to have a singular metric to report against alongside our financial return and investment. So I don't know if there's anything more you want to say on measurement, but great. And Guenther, what are you seeing right now in the industry that's exciting you?
Where to start? I mean, obviously the industry, the industry is really growing fast, right? Like 3 years ago, this was starting, and people were just kind of playing around with it. It seems today, right? And today it has almost tripled or quadrupled, and will go on like that. So what we're seeing right now, positively, but also a little bit unfortunately, is that there's a lot of people focusing on particular solutions for particular products, rather than going into any kind of big kind of change of the industry as such. Where obviously we also have this big challenges, but also with bringing this bottom up and bringing it together with a kind of a top down. We hope that eventually it will lead to something that has an industry-wide impact. And there's all the big companies out there who are starting to do their stuff. I mean, we're talking like 0.0 something of their total turnover to do that. But it's great to see that, because if I was talking to, I don't have to give you the name, so you know who they are, right? But 5 years ago, they would have laughed at me. And now they're starting that project, I would call it, right, with some people who are really, really fond about that, and they're giving them leeway to do that, and they're bringing it internally. So in that sense, I'm kind of really fascinated by some of the kind of stuff that is being done on sneakers and on whatever, and on the other hand, on the big companies coming together.
Hmm.
And what about you, Cristina?
Just, yeah, to support that point, so a couple of things. In terms of to answer as well, to add on the point of your question before, Rachel, it's very interesting to see the fact that it's very important, the customer desirability, because we talk a lot about sustainability, but unless the product is beautiful and it's really qualitative, it's not going to, to kick off or to really grow sustainably. So that's very important as well in terms of designers or in terms of the retailers to have that into account. The customer desirability is a very important point, as well all the part of technology. So there's a lot of mimics in technology, but how the technical feasibility together with customer desirability and business viability and the teams itself, everything have to be together in order to have this new area of circular economy and circular fashion grow. So, because I'm sure that you have seen there's a lot of, extremes of things that might not be so desirable. And at the end of the day, then of course, consumers go back to previous type of products. So that's why this kind of customer desirability together with the technical, like this, today, it's beautiful, but it's technical kind of feasible. So these are the key 4 pillars that I wanted to emphasize, the importance of, measuring as well success through all these areas of customer centric. So that's one part. Then in terms of what we are seeing, I mean, I don't know you guys, but it's so massive what's happening after COVID. The possibilities are more than ever. Technology is being faster than ever before. That means that we have a lot of possible areas. For example, just to mention a few, wellness and well-being is an area that before maybe was very separated to fashion, but now it's so connected. So let's say, IoT products or data, how everything will be probably in our bodies in the next, decade. So how this can be as well made beautifully and sustainably, because sometimes, it's completely to extremes. Something has to be, beautiful or technical. Why not both? So more and more, we are seeing things that are very beautiful in terms of health and well-being. Other areas as well is, for example, travel or leisure. How to travel or how things are at leisure is a huge area that I personally love because it's so much connected to integrating. And even after so many days at home, you can feel that you can totally wear something super comfortable and then now get out as well, to pick up the kids at a school. So that's so nice to see that at leisure it's becoming um, a strong point, making it as well, of course, sustainable. So we are seeing more than ever incredible brands that, like Veja, for example, Allbirds, or Everlane. So we have so nice, that is not only sustainable but as well extremely beautiful. So other areas that I wanted to share, probably, the in terms of education, for example, how educate the consumer on the fashion industry. So it's kind of being integrated. So the edutainment, let's say, education and entertainment into the circular fashion or into this area of circularity and the circular economy. So all the different areas are becoming very integrated. So we are looking a lot into platforms that enable this enhancement of customer experience, but not only on the what you wear, but how you wear it and why you wear it. So what's your why that connects your being with what you are wearing? So it's
Mm-hmm.
really about define who you are. Maybe you don't need to follow the trends, because if what you love is something extremely sustainable or extremely craftsman and personalized, and it's not about following the trend, so why not? If that's who that defines who you are. So
Mm-hmm.
more and more the educational part, I believe it's very important. I know that Lorenzo and Yun are working very hard on that, on how to educate consumers, on being and wearing what they want. And of course, sustainability is becoming a huge trend. For example, about rental or secondhand. This was not so popular, and now it's becoming a huge trend and extremely cool. So why not to be a bit out of the box and think what's next for fashion, breaking,
Mm-hmm.
and disrupting. Mm.
It's quite interesting. We did a little project, if you want to call it like that, a couple of weeks ago, and it was about T-shirts, right? And we were being very circular and whatnot. And basically, I went into my cupboard and found 64 T-shirts, right? And I was like, okay, how many T-shirts do I really need? So I was like, maybe 15 at max, right? And then I was looking through them, and they were like really old, and I was like, yeah, I gotta throw them away. And what this brought us to is a circular movement kind of blockchain project, also with basically tracking it all and linking it up to the platforms, as you rightly called it. And there's one in Switzerland and another one in the Isle of Man, which are doing that. And then we was like, okay, so I'm basically subscribing for 10 to 15 T-shirts, and then what I get is basically the logo on it. But that's all I need, right? When I don't like one anymore, I send it back and get a new one, and you have this basically drop kind of a dynamic that's going on, right? Every T-shirt is produced only once you order it, uh, basically turning around the kind of, well, whatever you want to call it, the old system of the industry where people are producing those T-shirts, putting them into the market, and two-thirds of them are never bought. And you've been talking about that, but you find yourself like sitting in the deep of it. And obviously, we are a bit too old to be really in the change. And when I talk to my young colleagues, they're more about it. But even there, that was not there. So this is kind of interesting projects going on. It's a lighthouse project, as we call it, and we're launching it like fully in a week or so. And we hope that it has some kind of impact on people.
I think
That's
you've really
super cool,
touched on
Lorenzo. Wow.
yeah, such an amazing change in consumer consciousness and what younger buyers are demanding now. But there's also been so much innovation. And I also agree with you, Cristina. It's a form of self expression, and it's a really important way to recognize that there are so many other ways that we can do that without having to buy new. And swaps are a great example of, how we can keep the model circular. So I couldn't agree more. I'm curious what you're observing around gaps. I mean, we're on the investing panel, and there's a critical role that capital plays in this whole picture. And from a gap perspective, what I've observed is for some of these companies that have proven technologies, they can get funding, maybe seed funding or early venture funding, just to build out these innovations, to test them out. Maybe they get their product market fit. But as soon as they start to build larger scale infrastructure projects, there seems to be a gap in the market. This is a gap that we hope to help fill. But when you're dealing with large assets, sometimes these are costly investments that are too big for venture and too small for traditional infrastructure funds. And then there's this gap in the middle. I think about one of our companies, which is in the waste management area, where it takes mixed municipal waste and converts it into high value chemicals and fuel. And because it's a purely circular model, it can also be used as a feedstock for other industrial processing, including PET, BTX, for plastics. But what challenges they saw when they were fundraising was that there wasn't capital available to go from the early prototype to early commercialization. And that's in our business. I'm just curious what gaps you've seen as investors and as a soon to be returning investor. What are you observing that's needed right now in the market?
Yeah, quick one.
I can take it first. I
Yeah,
think basically, to be honest, I'm seeing only holes, right? Especially in Europe. If this is what we're talking about, I'm not really fit to talk about Asia or America in that sense. But in Europe, first of all, you got to be lucky if you find somebody. There's maybe, let's call them 20 investor funds that are really focused on that, or maybe 25, but that's kind of the maximum which we're seeing. So you're basically getting your early funding. Then if you want to go forward, then you basically find yourself either working with a big corporate or just hoping and praying, but we don't really see it going on right now. So there's this huge push, obviously, on EU level and so forth to come up with funding for that kind of space, which is very important in particular for Europe, because it's all about knowledge and kind of the things that are going on and it's linking in with the new generation. We don't want to lose that in any case, but it would be a lie to say that it's going through. It's not. I think it's true in general for innovation, and it's in particular true for the innovation that we are looking at in here. So if you ask me pre-COVID, I would have said it's another 5 years until this is filling up. Now with COVID, it's probably 6, 7 years. I mean, nobody knows. But to say that there's a fully kind of walk-through path is just not true.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting, guys. I really like this question, Rachel and Guenther, because I believe there's agree with you, big gaps. So we could see in the last 10, 20 years, two groups kind of investments, the one fashion or designers or brands themselves, and then the other extreme, we had tech. So the big companies, so the top 5 in US now, of course, the last 10 years more in China as well. So we are in this intersection point where everything is getting intertwined, and we have ahead of us a massive opportunity. For example, here in Asia, we see there's 3 billion people, a huge amount of consumers, 1 billion consumers that will be entering, the area of integrating digital, physical experiences, and of course, that means consumer goods as well into the sustainability area. So I see a key areas, for example, one is the consumer goods on the O2O, so online, offline, and digital experiences. This is going to be big. That means that people in the industry, from tech and from creatives, they talk and they work together. So that's great opportunity ahead of us. And as well, to add to your point, Rachel, that there's this kind of very early stage, or then, big corporates and um, I would say private equity kind of level. But there's this sweet spot, which is the growth equity, which is, let's say 5 to 20 million, 5, 10, 20 million investment, where we can have this J curve of support, where people from the industry like us, we can support these local companies to make them grow digitally. So there's two big areas. One is the small companies in Europe, beautiful, that they've been alive for the last, hundreds of years, but they don't know how to grow. So then how people in the industry can help them grow. That's one of the things that we are working on. And the other one is like extremely tech companies, but they don't have maybe the presence, the physical presence, or the retail presence. So that's why, it's good as well to create maybe showrooms, or maybe, one store, big flagship, or one temple, where people can go and experience, and then buy on the fingertips once they are in the stores. So there's this kind of extremes, but I believe there's this big gap on investment, in terms of growth equity. So between venture capital and between private equity, there's definitely a big opportunity as well in Asia, guys, because Asia, it's massive. There's a lot of growth. So to be truly global, one have to be, in Asia. I'm happy to connect you, anybody in the audience as well, with investors, because the opportunity is massive, and of course the customers are really ready to jump onto online, and where Gen Z and millennials, and of course alpha generation, very ready to go digital. And then there's this big area opportunity as well on the entrepreneur mindset, so how to support entrepreneurs to have more on the growth side, to be more structured on the corporate point of view, and to maybe be acquired by corporates, or, for example, to work together with Guenther and people in the industry, to be able to work with corporate venture capital, to be either acquired, or to do commercial agreements, or to do something that maybe big corporates cannot do because they're too big, So there's this nice space where we are experiencing. But it's definitely an opportunity for us, which is, I mean, a 6 trillion market if we count the fashion, health and well-being, luxury. It's a massive opportunity. And I'm sure that in the next 10 years, we're going to see big changes. And sustainability is, of course, big one of the ESGs. I believe it's going to be a game changer in all this area of consumer goods.
Hmm. I'm really glad you brought up corporate venture, because one of the things that I've heard from some corporate venture firms is that they don't have the same fund size that some of the dedicated growth equity funds have, and they're not sure how they can really make a difference. And I think you bring an excellent point, which is by partnering with some of these companies, these smaller startup companies, and making long-term revenue commitments, making investments in certain places that can integrate them into their supply chain, or in other ways, bringing some of their core capabilities to bear. They have all these other areas of value that they can bring to address a challenge, and could always co-invest too with funds that are dedicated to this area. So I'm really glad you bring that up.
Fully agree, Rachel. That's what we've been doing the last, 5, 7 years with the Facebook. The last 5 years, that's one of the companies was like, that we had this program, the cage, that they came, and we had the commercial agreement, and we worked together on how to implement blockchain into our garments and pre-loved luxury goods to be sold, in our stores. So they were the perfect example that, to your point, Rachel, this integration of corporates with the startups is possible, and it's definitely needed, because so much we can learn from them, and vice versa. Yeah.
Yes,
And
it's a great opportunity. Last year, we've seen a project by New Balance. We're teaming up with Cardano, the blockchain company, and it was not fully circular or anything, but it was kind of starting at the end of the lab bench, I would call it, but at the end of the production, and really just showing what could be done. So it gives a great idea what maybe 2 years from now will be there once you have the entire production cycle really tracked. and basically on the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Very
problem,
interesting.
obviously, I have to be the devil's advocate here, with corporate ventures is that you're making a big bet at the very beginning. So especially when you're coming not from the industry, but you come from the outside, basically you're betting on one or two players of the existing industry, and the question is, will they be around, or are they cornering you in a particular corner? So in that sense, I say yes, it's very good to have them. It's great for all the advantages which you touched upon. But on the other hand, if you're really bringing in the disruption kind of element, it's a bit of a risk as well. So you have to be very mindful about that.
Yeah, for all of the startup companies out there, it is often seen as critical to have an agreement with a corporation. But you're right. There's a risk factor, which is that they can make a lot of demands and use a lot of your resources and take up a lot of your time. Maybe make certain requirements on your roadmap. And you're right. If they're not innovating as well, there's a risk too in being too committed to a single entity.
Yes. Okay. This question is from Glennis.
Yes.
Can you hear
Hi.
us?
Yes, I can hear
Hi.
you. Hi, how are you?
Perfect.
What is government actually doing in order to give incentive for those companies that are actually doing the right thing to reduce the carbon and to reduce the plastic and reduce and work in the circular fashion? I think, are they doing enough or they need to do more? Because it just seems to be that they need to be incentive for those that are doing well in order for others to come on board.
Wonderful question. I really appreciate that question. And I'm based in California in the United States. So I can say very honestly and directly that the government is not doing anywhere near enough. In fact, this current administration is rolling everything back. But as the state of California, there have been significant incentives, including the low carbon fuel standard and others, which are trying to create meaningful incentives and programs for companies to do the right thing. But again, it's nowhere near enough. And I know that, there are so many international agreements and programs that have been outlined, but there also needs to be investment. There are countries like France are really leading the way in using some of the recovery spending to make investments in a greener economy. And I hope that, in a month when maybe we have a different administration, we can also say that we'll be investing in a similar way.
So I was sharing with you guys, I'm here in Singapore and the government is extremely supportive. So it's really having, for example, programs for startups that just focus on sustainability, on anything related to technology and, the future of positive impact. So that's extremely remarkable. I've never seen something like that before, because it really cares about people, about the planet, and about, of course, the prosperity as well of the community. So they are doing a lot of initiatives. It's called the Bridge Fashion Incubator, and they welcome 10 startups that are focusing exactly on this area, sustainability and design. I'm happy to share offline as well. But that's one initiative. They, for example, there's Vogue just opened here as well in Singapore, and they're only focusing on sustainability and technology. So more and more, this part of the world, we are seeing that the intention is there, mainly because the consumers are asking for it. So that's very good news, because we are working very closely on understanding, as to connect on the previous point on the ESG's measurements and impact measurements, and therefore bringing it into action through support on the startups that are making this happen. So Singapore, for me, it's an incredible example of positive governmental support.
That's amazing and very interesting to see two different sides of the world, how they approach things differently. Thank you so much, Glennis, for your question.
And I know Cristina also had something she wanted to say about this.
Yeah, please, while I sort myself out.
Yes, no problem. We can see you. I can see you. But to build on Rachel's point, is definitely an area I fully believe in and personally invest, because I believe on the future of sustainability, ESGs, it all has to be through education, because there's a big gap still on the educational side, on the consumer side. For example, I'm the first one that I keep learning every day, and the more I know, the more I understand I don't know, because it's so much in terms of being able to understand how much we are impacting the world on, let's say, on this area in our industry. But besides the education in terms of sustainability and impact, there's as well a big area, for example, on well-being. So I love the area, for example, of continuous education on the self, in the sense of the preventive type of medicine, or things as well, on east and west type of medicine, or things about the well-being that but go beyond the education that we learn, at university or at school. So it's really continuous education on areas that you might have passion about. So it's more and more proven that we have different probably stages in our lives, and maybe we have different type of passions or jobs, or paths. So why not to re-educate yourself? And more than ever, it's going to be important, because AI is going to replace a lot of jobs, but new jobs will be created. So these jobs require skills education on areas that are mainly focusing on the human side. Let's say critical thinking, leadership, how to, take important decisions, or how to manage oneself, how to, be healthy and be, extremely supportive into the future of humanity. So there will be new jobs that we haven't even heard of yet. I don't know if you have kids, but I'm sure that your kids, our, next generation, the alpha generation that is growing now, they probably will have a job that we haven't even heard of yet. So how to educate, and to platforms that educate, and we are, for example, this kind of gap generation of the ones that we grew up with no tech at all, or the ones that were born after, the 2000s, and then everybody grew up with tech. So there's a huge gap. It's only, 10, 20 years gap, but this means that people like us, we need to create new ways of educating, and there's definitely extremely interesting investment at that. I think it's one of the areas that is growing the fastest, because education can go beyond the typical, education of the mind. It goes as well on the education of the soul, education of the skills, like, for example, mastermind, or which ones, that's all these super cool platforms that now, after COVID, people is just self-educating themselves in all these new ways that we wouldn't even have thought before. So podcasts, or even how you become your own content educator for the rest. There's very interesting area. I'm happy to discuss offline as well. But, yeah,
I would add
let's
to
be
your
creative,
point.
I believe, as well.
And I would add to your point, Cristina, that now because of COVID-19, there's a real dire need to ensure that we address disparities in education and the lack of resources for students and families who don't have the same access to resources. So on that front, I think there's a lot of innovation that's been happening in virtual education, and that should continue. But we also need to make sure that we don't increase the gaps that are already there.
So true, so true. To add to that point, for example, another huge area for that, we can food for thought is financial inclusion. So that means a lot of education, in terms of how everybody can be included, to be part of, the next generation of jobs. And we will be our own income, let's say. Through blockchain, everything will be decentralized. So you will be able to become your own source of, income. I love, I'm trying to create the humetrics, which is the human metrics. So that means that you will have your own value as a person. So you will not be only, it's not about how much money you have in your bank account, it's how much value you create and you impact to the humanity. And that will be your real value. and that could be applied to anyone, not only, the most privileged, like the ones we are now today, that's, we can spend a Sunday being an Oculus in a conference. There's so much that we can be supporting the, less privileged, but they have a lot of skills and possibilities and definitely, potential. So how can we as a community, bring these human metrics into the next level and new economic models, new ways of, leveraging our knowledge and our purpose and our passion into something that can truly make a lasting and sustainable impact for everyone. So everyone is included.
That's such an important topic. And if our speakers aren't in a big rush, we have one more person. Would you be able to take one more question?
Sure.
So there is Anna Fabia. Can you hear us?
Hi. Yes, I
Hi.
can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I would like to congratulate you for the great speeches that you made. And my question is about the metrics. Fashion industry have big issues with the metrics, as for example, water usage, carbon emissions, working conditions. So everybody's saying that the fashion industry has to be more sustainable. But the big problem that they say is that the lack of metrics. How the investment impact can help to make it more transparent? Is there some fundings or some programs or something like that? Thank you.
So I definitely agree. Just a quick one on this one. Fully agree with you that there's not enough metrics. And these metrics have to come, there's two areas, either the governments that put these metrics, or the corporates themselves. But there's a big challenge there because, for example, let's say Amazon or the big ones, if you put a metric on the deliveries and the carbon footprint that all these companies are creating to be able to deliver your things, less than 24 hours, it's massive. So of course they're not interested to do that because that would reduce the profitability. Therefore, it has to come probably from responsible governments that take action. And the more you for example, want something right here, right now, the more you will have to pay as a consumer, or the more the companies will have to pay for taxes or for being able to deliver. It's a tricky part because it affects profits. And when everything affects profits, we know that then it has to come from higher kind of common good. Therefore, I'm with you. We are not there yet.
I would also like to add, I can't really hear, so I don't know if you're still talking, but I also like to add that with the emergence of new consumer service models, on-demand fashion, the digitization of everything, there's also been an increase in the use of air freight to ship items to consumers. And what people don't realize is that dramatically increases the carbon footprint for every article of clothing. So this is an area where companies need to be more transparent about their use of air freight to ship items, because it is a very costly way to send items, and most consumers aren't aware of the mode of delivery. And if you could choose a more eco-friendly way to have your items arrive, shipping by truck or ship, etc., that would actually be an immediate way to put pressure on the companies to be more cost-effective from the carbon footprint standpoint. I also think that there aren't enough metrics around measuring biodiversity loss, which is a really big issue. Most companies, 80% of the biodiversity impacts are through their supply chain. And so if we could have better metrics around how we're preserving the biodiversity and the fundamental ecosystems upon which we depend, that would also be a big area of opportunity.